And from there, we're going to talk more about our college application essays.
So for my first essay, I answered the prompt what I did for fun, and I wrote about running under the sunset. And when I write, I tend to use a lot of imagery and metaphors because art was such a huge part of my high school experience. I wanted to show through my writing that I viewed the world through kind of an artistic lens. And as a result, my wording got a little flowery, but it really doesn't have to be like that. In the second example, my essay is a lot less flowery and it's a lot more direct and to the point. But I'm still really happy with it because I was able to combine my love for computer science, art, and cats.
So Stuti actually cannot be here today, so I'll just kind of talk about her essay for you guys. Um, Kind of compared to what Audrey showed earlier, like her first essay, that was really flowery, right? But you don't have to write that like that at all, like she mentioned. Suti tends to be more straightforward with her writing, and she had many different interests. So what she did is she tried to connect them all, like all her different activities in her essay by using leadership as a common theme. So she talked about she doesn't really know where her interests truly lie. She's still exploring. So whether that be journalism, business, or biology. She doesn't know that yet, but what she does know that she wants to be a leader in the future. So that was her theme, and she was very straightforward. She didn't use any flowery language. She just answered the question, which is, as always, the most important thing that you want to do.
For me, one of the things I wanted to do in my supplements was just write something different because I never really liked anecdotes too much. Like my Common App was an anecdote, and I didn't really want to do that, but I ended up doing that. So for my supplements, I wanted to do something different, and I think most of the time people are scared of doing that just because different can also mean that an instant rejection if it's not what they want. So this was what I ended up writing for one of the supplements that was elaborate on your extracurriculars, and mine was running. And it's like a poem, and I really like this. So yeah, don't be afraid to take risks because you never know. And this was the USC prompt that so it's a quick take, so it's only 100 characters. And like everyone I showed this to told me that I shouldn't submit it, but I ended up submitting it anyway, and I got in. So yeah, you never really know what can happen.
One thing that I like to be aware of while I was writing my college essays was that the people in these essays are reading thousands of them in a day. So if you can do anything different, kind of like what Nitin was saying, if you can do anything even slightly different that will surprise them or even like make them feel something, whether it's good or like, sadness, it's usually going to be in your favor because you basically want to leave an impact with your essay. So for this particular essay, it was the UMich cultural prompt. So it was asking what ethnic, religious, or geographic communities you belong to. And I basically talked about how I grew up not feeling Indian enough in a lot of ways because I felt like I didn't wear Indian clothes enough, or I didn't like wearing Indian clothes particularly, or I didn't watch Bollywood movies and things like that, or just small superficial ways that I kind of grew up feeling like I wasn't Indian. And I was really proud of this particular essay because I think I did a really good job about talking about my own story in like a sort of like informative view, but I also gave a lot of insight into my personality. And so if you can do anything novel or different while also completely exploring a new facet of your personality that you haven't showcased yet in the rest of your application, whether it's in your Common App or the rest of your supplements, I think that would be really good to do in one of your supplements.
Okay, yeah, so this was my response to one of the UC prompts. So the nature of a UC essay is different than your Common App. It's going to be more straightforward and more directly answering your question. However, I did want to make sure that you could still see my personality through it and like my thought processes and things like that. So I did have imagery, and I wrote it in a story narrative. So some context for this, I was an aide at like my church catechism class, and then one day the teacher didn't show up. So I had to step up and become a leader and just teach a class by myself. So I really illustrated my growth through using this story narrative. But even though it is kind of flowery at points, I make sure to have tangible actions, because since it is a UC prompt, they do want to be able to go and read your essay and see, okay, they did this, which shows leadership. So I made sure I showed exact things and was really made sure to use details to show exact examples of leadership that I did. And I go more in depth into that later on in my essay.
Now that we're done with that, we're gonna talk more about like our reflection after we're done, after we finish the college application process. One thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about coming out of this is their personal failures or setbacks, I think is a more accurate term. You always hear about the kids who get into their dream schools, but you never think about all the schools that they didn't get into, or some of the setbacks that they faced while they were in this process. And that, like, you know, we believe that that's not right, because definitely you're going to feel the pressure and the stress, and it's normal, and we should normalize it. So we're going to begin with talking about our regrets and stuff.
So in my application, my biggest regret was definitely that I only ended up writing one draft of my personal statement. And even though I personally liked it, I realized in hindsight that I had been very hasty in how I approached it. First of all, I had already sort of backed myself into a corner because of procrastination and, you know, general bad decisions. But also, once I had my draft, I already felt so attached to it, and that I kind of was biased towards it already, which was bad for my favor. So I think, you know, if I had the chance to do it again, I would have definitely written several drafts right off the bat so that I could be faced with several ideas that I could then refine again and again. And then also that I had a lot of different passions, as like I shared in my activity section earlier on. But I wasn't able to combine them in the way that I had hoped that I would. You know, in my mind, now that I think back to it, there's a lot of ways that I could have better expressed how I wanted to bring those interests together in the future, but I think that I wasn't able to have that flow that I was really going after. So that's another thing that I probably would have changed. But, you know, looking back, I'm still pretty proud of what I did then, so it was still a good experience.
For me, definitely my biggest regret is not being proactive enough. Going into this whole process, I thought like it tends to work out for most people, right? Like thousands of people go through the system. They tend to be happy with the results. I was like, all right, let's just go with the flow. But that was my excuse for like my procrastination. Even though things do end up working out for most people, you want to avoid the unnecessary stress. Just start as soon as possible. Even doing little things can like amplify and lower your workload by a lot. And I just wasn't doing that. Like I remember I didn't even want to come up with the college list until the very end of the summer. I don't even know why. That doesn't take a lot of time, you know? I think part of it was also that it was like the stress that was looming and me realizing that I'm like growing up or whatever, as cheesy as that sounds. And I kind of wanted to like avoid that forever. So just don't do that, right? Because it affected my mental health for sure. Senior year, first semester was really tough. I was also taking a bunch of classes. So just try to avoid that unnecessary stress as much as you can. Yes, things will work out, but you want to just be proactive from the beginning. Also, on that note, don't submit your completed college list the day of the very last deadline. So at our school, we have this thing called SSRs, which stands for secondary school reports. And that's basically, it kind of, every college needs one, basically, almost every college. And if you don't submit the list of colleges by the certain deadline, then you can't apply to that college anymore. And so I didn't even have my college list ready until like early December and late November. That is so late. That's when people are like grinding their essays out, and I didn't even have this ready. And so that added a lot of stress for sure. I also had some issues with my letters of recommendations. I don't want to get into too much detail, but basically I wasn't very good about checking up on one of my teachers that I asked a recommendation letter for. I didn't really understand their protocol, and so I was really hasty with everything. So one like big piece of advice is like just know what they want from you, because and what ended up happening is that their letter of recommendation wasn't sent to every school that I wanted their letter to be sent to. So I had to go to their classroom and ask them, oh, like, could you like send like a PDF to all these colleges? And I don't even know if they got it because it was after the deadline. So like there was just so much like uncertainty, and you want to avoid that, right? Just by being proactive. Another thing that was like more specific to me for sure is that I'm considered to be an international student. So I wish that I'd known my immigration status more, like what that meant, not just for college applications, but for like me living in America in general. It's definitely a lot harder to get in. I wish that I'd known that more so that when I did not get into some of the schools that I wanted to go to, I wouldn't be as disappointed. I would have been more realistic with it.
As for me, my first regret would be that I wished I was more strategic with my early applications. My reasoning behind choosing my early decision school was just randomly picking an Ivy League school that I could somewhat see myself in without a lot of research. And I wish I also applied to more early schools that weren't such a reach so that I could potentially get good results earlier and have a college under my belt. My college list was also not really good because I applied to way too many reach schools, which is also shotgunning. It's really not a good idea to let prestige to get into your head. So apply to colleges you really see yourself in and enjoying, not just because of the name. And I also wished I researched more for the why college essays because I felt like my essays were just super generic. I could have added more things like specific professors or courses I found interesting to make it seem more persuasive that I'm interested in that specific college.
So personally, first semester senior year was a bit of a low point for me because I was basically like a master procrastinator for college apps. So you can think of like the main procrastinator, whatever, like whatever procrastinating means to you. I was like worse than that. So for me, like the summer before for first semester senior year, so the summer before senior year, I like had like various things going on. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna start my college apps. I can start on that when school starts. And then even when school started, I was taking like a bunch of AP classes. I had a sport marching band, and I was also doing research. So it all kind of like boiled down. I think one of the lowest points is when I had like a research paper due one day, and I literally had to like just skip school and take the entire day to write a research paper. And so that ended up making my apps also really rushed and probably not as high quality as they could have been. So main thing from that, obviously, do not procrastinate. Like you're going to hear a lot of people say this, but it's really real because it's really going to have a toll on like your mental health, on like pretty much everything, being able to commit to everything by having too many things going on and like having a lot of schools and not being able to put your all into all your schools. But at the same time, like kind of opposite to that is also like give yourself breaks when you're writing your essays, because I think I realized for me, I did pretty much all my regular apps during winter break, which is not advisable, but when I did that, like I did manage to find like times to also take breaks and like do kind of winter break things, because you wouldn't really spend the entire day working on your apps either. Like you have to give yourself a day or maybe like an hour to like do some other things. And just one other regret that I had personally was I didn't really look too much into visiting schools before. So like I kind of just did my online research and I was like, oh, I'll visit my schools after I get in, which obviously didn't happen. And so that made it really hard for me to like choose schools later on. So even though you guys like for rising seniors or seniors this year, you guys can't really go visit schools, still really look into the virtual tours and stuff that they offer online, because like actually being able to see the vibe of the school will definitely help you both with your applications and also later on when you're choosing schools.
Another thing to keep in mind is that everyone has a different opinion, and when you show your essay to so many people, they're all going to give you their own opinion, and it's going to inevitably be different. So like really remember that the only person that, or the only opinion that matters is yours, because it's your essay and it represents you. For me, I had submitted my essay to an essay review service, and the person completely like thought my essay was terrible. And like they said, they pointed out so many things wrong with it, and this was like 4 weeks before the November 1st deadline. I was like freaking out, but I managed to pull myself together, and I showed it to some other people, and they were like, it's fine. So yeah, just remember that everyone's opinion is different, and just because someone doesn't like it doesn't mean it's actually bad.
So for me, the hardest part of the college application process was near the end of the year. I took a bunch of APs during my senior year, and so when all the end of the semester projects and the finals and studying for the finals rolled around, and it started to overlap with the December 31st and January 1st essay deadlines, things started to get pretty hectic. There was also like senioritis, where I was like, I want to spend more time hanging out with friends or not care about grades. I just ended up procrastinating everything. Eventually it got pretty stressful. So to meet the essay deadlines, I was forced to like BS some essays or repurpose some other essays. And that just ended up making really crappy essays, which was a really big regret of mine.